Welcome to the complete beginner's guide to editing a video in Adobe Premiere. I've actually been editing in Premiere for over 10 years, and in this video, I'm excited to share with you my step-by-step process for editing a video with Premiere from start to finish. So whether you've never edited a video before, or you want to switch to Premiere from another editing program, by the end of this video, you'll learn everything you need to know to edit high-quality videos with Premiere Pro.
You gotta just press record.
What's up, everybody? Craig Pruitt here with Think Media. If you haven't already, go ahead and make sure you download the latest version of Adobe Premiere Pro, but this tutorial will work with most older versions of Premiere and future updates of Premiere as well. Today's video is sponsored by Storyblocks, but we'll talk about them a little bit more later. So for today's video, we're going to be creating a mini review about my favorite point and shoot camera, the Sony RX100 Mark VII, and you can download all of the footage that we use in today's video down in the description below, so you can follow along with this tutorial if you would like to. So step one is to organize our footage, and you don't want to skip this step. It's going to make life so much easier for you when it comes to editing and even revisiting your project later down the road if you organize up front. So what I'm going to do is dive into my Think Media main folder right here. And inside of tutorials, we're going to create a new folder and title this RX100 Mini Review, because that's the project we're going to be creating today together. And then inside of this folder, I'm going to add 3 additional folders. We're going to make the first one called A-roll. And A-roll is just that kind of talking head style video. It's your main content delivery that you'll be recording for your video. And then I'm going to do another folder called B-roll. And that's all that supplemental footage we can add to our video to just enhance it a little bit more. And then we'll also add one last folder called project files. And that's where our Premiere Pro project file will live, as well as any additional assets that we might want to upload. So wherever your footage is, whether it's on your computer already or still on your SD card of your camera, you can copy that footage. So I'm going to move my A-roll into my A-roll folder. Then I have a bunch of B-roll right here that I'm going to copy and bring into our B-roll folder right there. And then in terms of project files, I do have a few assets that I want to dive into my project file bin as well and let those live right there. So now that our footage is organized, it's time to open up Premiere and get our project file set up. So you can go ahead and open up Premiere, and typically you'll see this kind of interface at the beginning. But what we'll do is go up to the left corner and hit New Project. And right here, we'll type in RX100 Mark VII Review, because that's the video we're making today. So that's the project name. And then we need to choose the location. And I'm going to locate this in our project files bin that we created. So we'll navigate to that tab. So this is the RX100 mini review, and inside of project files, we're going to just let the project file live right there. So hit select, and we're not going to use a template for this. And for now, I'm going to hit skip import mode because we don't need to look at that right now, and just go ahead and hit create. So when Premiere opens up, you'll see all of these different blank windows. You have like a source window where you can ingest your source footage, or the footage that's not on your timeline yet. You have a program window, properties. I actually like closing the properties window, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. And if your windows look a little bit different than mine, you can dive up here to this tab and click workspaces. And so I like to use the editing workspace or the color workspace typically when I'm editing. Now you might be in the starter window if you've never opened Premiere before. It might look like that, or the essentials window. So there's all these different workspaces. For today, I'd encourage you to click on the editing workspace and then get yours looking something like this. If you need to close a different window, you can close a window if it's open or something. But today we want source, program, our project window, and our timeline. Those are the main 4 things we're going to be working with today. So that's the sort of layout of Premiere. But now when it comes time to import your footage into Premiere, all of that work that we did at the beginning to organize our footage is really going to pay off, because now we can navigate to our Finder window, click A-roll and B-roll. I'm even going to open up project files and grab my assets folder as well by holding Command. Now I have all of these 3 folders, and I'm just going to drag them directly into this bottom left project window and release. And then all of the footage is going to import right there. And now I can even organize by like frame rate or name. I'm going to click name so that they're organized in that kind of format. What I'll even do right now is actually right click on this open space down here. And I'm going to create a new bin called footage. So now I'm going to drag our B-roll and our A-roll inside of this footage bin. And now we have a footage folder with all of our A-roll and B-roll, and an assets folder with different assets that I've downloaded for this video, like music, some photographs, some animations, etc. So we're going to use those for our project today. So now that our project is completely organized and we have footage imported, it's time to start editing. So what I'm going to do is open up my A-roll folder right here, and I'll double click this. And this A-roll is going to open up in the source window. So we can see it up here, but this footage isn't directly editable yet because it's not in our timeline. So in order to make this footage directly editable, we need to create what's called a sequence in Premiere. And that's what Premiere kind of calls a timeline, an editing timeline. So you can see over here, this is your timeline, but there's no sequence selected. The easiest way to create a sequence would be to click your A-roll and drag that directly into this area that says drop media here to create sequence. And boom, now we have a sequence ready to go. If you didn't want to do it that way, you could delete that. And you can see it's actually created a sequence over here, but I'll delete it for now and show you one other way. You can actually right click in this area and select new item sequence. And you can select from these various sequences here. I've actually created a custom sequence. It's like a 4K 24 frames per second sequence, but you can go into like their social media presets, 4K UHD presets. So there's all these things. You can click settings, and if you want to select a specific resolution, you could type in, like, if you want a 4K sequence, 3840 by 2160, or you could type in like 1920 by 1080 if you wanted a 1080p sequence. And you can see that's a 16:9 aspect ratio. So don't let all this confuse you too much. Ideally, the easiest way would be to grab your A-roll, and as long as you shot it in the correct frame rate that you want your timeline to be in, as you can see, my A-roll was shot in 24 frames per second right here. So I'm just going to drag that directly in, and that sequence should be good to go. If we hover over these icons, you can see that they're different things. So right here, this shows that it's a sequence. And then this one right here, if I hover over it, shows it's a MP4 movie file. And so what I'm going to do is rename this sequence to RX100 Mark 7 Review. So now I know that this is my sequence, and I'm actually going to pull this out of my A-roll bin and just drag it over here. So now it's just out here floating around in my project window, and I'm going to create a new bin and call it sequences, and then drag that sequence inside of my sequences bin. And we're just staying really organized so that our sequences are in one location and our assets are there and our footage is there. So nothing is overlapping, and it's easy to find sequences if you need to move them around. So at this point, you'd be ready to start working on your A-roll footage and start cutting down your video to whatever your content is about. Now you can zoom in on your timeline by just kind of pulling this slider in a direction right here, or you can hit the plus and minus buttons on your keyboard, which is my favorite way to zoom in and out. And I see all these mistakes right here. And I remember when I was filming my A-roll, I had several different mistakes, but this is the part where the hook that I actually got correct. So I want to delete everything to the left of this playhead. The quickest way to do that is just by hitting the C button to open up the cut tool. Another way you could select this tool is go down here to the razor tool, which is the shortcut of C. I typically call it the cut tool because it makes cuts. And I need to go maybe one frame back. I'll use the arrow keys to kind of cycle between frames. I'll zoom in really tight here. And I see that this is probably where I want my video to begin. So I'm going to make my first cut. And now you can see a nice little slice has been made in the video. And what we need to do now is all of this mistake over here on the left side, we need to remove. So I can actually hit V on my keyboard. So right, we had the cut tool. Now we hit V. You can see right here, it's a selection tool, but the shortcut is V. So now I can click on that area of all of those mistakes and just hit delete. And now that item is deleted, but now our video starts at like 44 seconds in, so we don't want that. So we need to click that open space right there and hit delete so we can close that gap. And now our video starts with the very first frame is our hook. This is my favorite point and shoot camera, and it might be the best point and shoot camera ever made. Let's talk about it. And that's looking great. So that's about a 6-second hook right there for this video. And now we need to go through the entire video and cut out all of those mistakes. But it could be a little taxing to like add cuts everywhere, click delete, move things over. And there's a faster way to do this called the ripple edit tool, where you're able to sort of like make cuts and also move everything over at the exact same time. So let's go to where the next body of content delivery was, which was right here for me. So we can see that that's like, you know, another handful of seconds in, maybe 10 seconds in. And instead of making a cut right here, what I'm going to do is press the Q tool. And what that's going to do is delete everything to the left of my playhead up until the last cut that I made, and also move everything over to the left. So as I perform this action, hitting Q, boom, everything moves over and snaps to the next point in the video so I can watch what happens. This little camera right here is the Sony RX100 Mark 7. So that's a great way to speed up your editing workflow by using these different keyboard shortcuts. And so if you ever want to see what your keyboard shortcuts are, you can click the Premiere icon up here and go to keyboard shortcuts. And this is where you're able to see all of the different shortcuts and even remap some shortcuts. If you liked using different buttons for a different editing program, you can remap all of those to your preferred shortcuts here in the shortcuts menu. Now you can also do the same thing with the W shortcut. So maybe I make a cut right here at the next portion where I start talking. Then I go to where I ended speaking right here for this portion. And I'll show you if I hit the W key, it's going to delete everything from the right side of this playhead up until the next cut and then shift everything over really nicely. And that's a really quick way to start editing. So you don't have to like make a bunch of cuts, delete things, move everything over. It just gets kind of taxing to perform that operation over and over again. Another little handy tip when you're editing your A-roll is to expand your audio layer of your A-roll so that you're able to visually see your audio waveforms a little bit better. So these are all the different layers of video right here on the left side. So if we raise this video layer up, we'd be able to see it on layer 2 now. And now it's on layer 3. We'll just leave it on layer 1 for now, but the same thing is true with audio. We can layer our audio with multiple different layers. And right now, all of the A-roll is on layer 1. So what I'm going to do is grab this little handle right here and drag it out so that the A-roll is a little bit larger and I can visually see it a little bit better. It just helps me see all those dead spaces where I maybe have messed up. And I sort of know if there's like a really short take right here, that could be a mess up. And I could make a cut right here instead of like trying to listen to everything back a few times. And it just speeds up my workflow a lot by trimming down things really quickly. So at this point, I'm going to go through and cut up this whole video into about a 90-second edit so that we can start working with it a little bit more. Okay, now that our A-roll is all chopped up, the video is about 90 seconds in length. But the issue is I don't really know at what point I'm talking about different things because everything on this timeline is just blue and there's just a bunch of cuts everywhere. And I don't really know what is where and where I need to start placing B-roll. So a really helpful thing that I do for all of my videos, especially if it's like a review or maybe it's like a documentary or a wedding film, and there's different points in the video where I change the topic or I change the setting, I will start color coding the individual parts of that video a different color so it kind of indicates me visually on the timeline that something different is happening at that section of the video. So if we zoom in on the timeline right here, I know that all 3 of these clips are going to be the hook or the intro of the video. So if I right click on my timeline and I dive down to this label tool, I can actually label all of these clips a certain color. And what I'll do is just label it the very first color because it's the first section of the video, right? So we're going to label it violet. And now all of those clips that are associated with the intro are a specific color. And now I'll go in and literally color code the entire video to correspond to these different sections. So now our entire timeline is color coded and it looks really nice. And that's just going to save us some time when it comes time to add some additional things to our video. But as we can see right now, there's all of these hard cuts or what we call jump cuts everywhere, where I'm cutting out mistakes and we see like a jarring sort of cut. And it's not very polished. So now we need to add what's called B-roll to our edit to make things look a little bit more interesting. So in order to start adding some B-roll, we can dive over to this project window and open up our B-roll folder and start clicking through some of these clips. And so if I wanted to grab a shot, like right here is a shot of me just kind of holding the camera and showing it off. I can grab this clip and drag it by grabbing this video only icon. If you grab right here, you can actually drag the entire video clip, but it's going to grab the video and the audio file as well and overwrite everything that you have on your timeline like that. So you don't necessarily want to do it that way. An easier way too is actually to grab a specific portion of the video that you want to grab. So maybe I want to kind of skim through here and find a part like this part right here where I'm kind of just showing off the camera. I can hit I on my keyboard, and that's going to select an endpoint for the software to start grabbing footage from. So you can see it's kind of highlighted that endpoint. And then I can scroll forward in the timeline, maybe to this part where I start messing with it a little bit more and the camera gets shaky. And I'm going to hit O on my keyboard. And so that's selecting an out point. So now you can see we have a highlighted portion. And now if I grab this little icon right here, I can grab just the footage of the video and drag that to a different section. And now when I play back my footage, we'll see that that B-roll is laying on top of my A-roll on this second video layer right here that we have highlighted. And now let's hit play and see what it looks like. It also has a built-in pop-up viewfinder that you can use to take photos or record video. Nice, that's looking really good. Now I can even go back up to this source window and grab a different portion of this same clip. And I know that earlier in the video, I actually talk about the lens, the really nice zoom lens. So I can hit I on my keyboard again, and then play the video, scroll it forward a little bit, and then grab that portion right there as a brand new clip. And I know that right around here, I'm talking about the lens. Let's hit play. It has an equivalent 24 to 200 millimeter zoom range. So that's a great portion for me to show something about the lens actually zooming in and out. So I'm gonna move that over the top of this A-roll footage and hit play. It has an equivalent 24 to 200 millimeter zoom range, which is absolutely massive. Now there's also a way that you can more easily see your footage. If you wanted to double click any folder like this B-roll folder right here, it will open it up in this project window. And now I can see everything contained within this folder, but I can also change the icons from list view to a icon view. And that's going to show me these different icons, and I can kind of scrub through and see what the video clip is about. You can also like make it a little bit bigger too. If I want to like increase this size or bring it over here like this, you can rearrange these windows however you would see fit. And that can help a little bit to see what B-roll you're wanting to pull from. So as I'm adding B-roll to my edit right here, I found a clip that I want to be able to slow down so I can extend the duration at which it plays on my timeline. And if you look over here, this is the clip that's highlighted. It's actually shot in 60 frames per second, and my timeline is a 24 frames per second timeline. That means I have a lot of additional frames in this clip that I can leverage to slow down the footage and extend it into slow motion footage. So this is the clip that we want to slow down. And if you right click on the clip and go to speed and duration, you can start messing with the speed of the clip. I'll hit cancel for a second, and I'll also show you a quick way you can access that is to click on your clip and hit Command R, and that'll bring up that same dialog box really quickly. And since this is a 60 frames per second clip on a 24 frames per second timeline, we can slow this down up to 40% speed. So I'm just going to type in 40 and hit OK. And now we can see that this clip has been slowed down and extended for a longer duration. So let's play this and get the timing right. Here is the Sony RX100 Mark VII, and it was released all the way back in. That's great right there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that clip right there and then let myself come back and visually see myself as the A-roll in 2019. So it's getting a little bit old at this point, but it's still a really awesome camera. Now at this point, I'll go through the entire video and find visuals that correspond to whatever talking head A-roll I'm talking about to just make my video more interesting. But sometimes you might not have the time or the capacity to shoot all of the B-roll that you want. And that's where our sponsor today, Storyblocks, comes in. Storyblocks gives you unlimited access to a massive library of high quality stock footage that you can use as B-roll, as well as motion graphics templates so you can level up your edits without spending hours filming B-roll or learning animation. I've actually personally been using Storyblocks for about 8 years to fill in all of the missing pieces of my video projects that I don't have time to go out and shoot. They have everything from tech-related content to real estate or business or gaming and much, much more. And for those of you who want to save a ton of time with your title animations, they have a ton of great animated title options as well. So if you're ready to take your videos to the next level and save a ton of time when you're editing, you can check out Storyblocks down in the description below. Okay, so this is what our video is looking like right now. We have an entire A-roll that's color-coded and organized. We now have B-roll that's sitting on top of our A-roll section, and all of the visuals correspond to what I'm talking about in the video. Now it's time to start working on some of the audio aspects of our video, including music, sound effects, and also correcting any sound things that's going on with our voice. So let's first talk about adding music to your video. And typically you're going to want your music to be on a different track than your voice would be or any sound effects. So you can typically keep these on 3 different audio layers. I usually have one audio layer for my voice, a different audio layer for sound effects, and then a third audio layer for music. So I typically like using a really upbeat track at the beginning of our videos to just set the tone and have a little bit of energy. Let's play this track right here. I love this track. So what I'll do with this audio clip is go forward in time, maybe about 8 seconds or so, and hit Out on my keyboard with the O key. And that just highlights a little beginning portion of this really high energy track. Then I'm going to grab this icon right here, the drag audio only option, and then drag that down into our timeline. And I put it on layer 3 right now because I'm going to put sound effects on layer 2. And you can see that because we color coded our timeline, this purple section is the hook. And I only want this really high energy stuff during the hook. So I'm kind of going to drag it so it just aligns with this purple section right here. So now we can listen to it back, but it's going to be a little bit too loud. Yeah, that definitely overpowers the mix. So we need to reduce the audio levels of our audio track right here. So what you can do really quickly is just hit G on the keyboard, and that's going to bring up your audio gain tool. And typically we like our audio to peak around maybe like -36 or -34 decibels. And so if I just hit like -34 right here, it's going to lower our decibels by 34 decibels, obviously. And now that's going to just fit a little bit better in the mix and still be able to hear my voice a lot better. This is my favorite point and shoot camera, and it might be the best point and shoot camera ever made. Let's talk about it. I'm also going to just add a little background track of music to our entirety of our content delivery by dragging this clip onto the timeline. But again, it's too long, so I'm going to cut it off right here and delete that. And then I'm also going to lower the audio levels because they're way too overpowered right now. I'll show you. 19, so it's getting, way too loud. So I'm going to hit gain, the G button on the keyboard, and then adjust my gain to -36 decibels, which is typically where we like it for our YouTube videos. 19, so it's getting a little bit, and that's nice and quiet in the mix, but you're still able to hear it on mobile phones or TVs, etc. But now what I want to do is add our Think Media intro bumper to the beginning of this video. But the problem is I need it to go right here in between everything else in our video. So I'm going to hit A on the keyboard, which is going to allow me to select everything on my track that comes to the right of wherever I click. And if I were to like shift click, I could select just one video layer, but I literally want everything. So I'm going to hit A on the keyboard, hit click, and now everything to the right of my timeline is highlighted. And then I will hit V to move everything over. And I'm just going to move it over a couple seconds to just give us some space to work with. Now I'm going to drag on this animation with the sound effect as well. And let me just play it for you so you can hear what it sounds like. I will solo the audio track so you can hear the whole animation.
You gotta just press record.
So we want to be able to add that sound effect and the visuals in their correct spot. So the timing here is going to be really important. So I'll raise the video portion of the clip up and then start dragging it over. And I'm just going to time it to where that animation pops up right at the end of my A roll. So if I zoom in, I can kind of see I stop talking right here, which is right where I want this animation to pop up. I actually want to move it one more frame over. So we did that right there. And now we need to sort of unlink some things so that we're able to move things more independently. So I'm going to make a cut with the C tool, hit cut on the animation, and I'm going to select both clips and hit unlink. So now I can move the video file and the audio file independently of each other. So all of this right here, I actually don't need. I need to delete this clip because I just want where it pops up right here. So clicking delete, and now I'm able to see myself during the outro, and then the animation comes on screen. We also have a couple of dead frames over here that we sometimes like to keep in, but for this video, I'm actually going to remove those. So we're going to click right here and delete them. So now it's just that Think logo that we see, and then we let the audio play out. So now I'm going to zoom out of my timeline again and hit A so that we can move everything that's to the right of our timeline over again. And we want to align it right with the end of this clip. So we're going to drag, drag, drag. We'll even let that kind of sound effect play and bleed into our first couple frames of our main content. And now everything's looking good. There's no black frames, no dead frames, anything like that. And we're looking good. Let's listen to the intro with the music added and that sound effect. Point and shoot camera, and it might be the best point and shoot camera ever made. Let's talk about it.
You gotta just press record.
So this little camera right, okay, that's looking and sounding pretty good, except my voice, I can tell, sounds a little bit muffled by using this wireless microphone that we were using right here. And I want to adjust my EQ is what it's called, or my equalization of my audio frequencies so that I can make them sound a little bit richer and a little bit fuller and even a little bit brighter as well. So what I personally like to do is edit my audio tracks, which are a little bit different than editing audio for an individual audio clip. When you're using your audio track mixer to edit your audio, you're actually applying these audio effects to every single audio clip that is in a certain track. This way you don't have to apply effects to every individual clip. So what we'll do is go up to Window right here, and we're going to open up the audio track mixer. And so that's going to open up here in our left window. And then if you click this little arrow, we can see our effects in our different tracks. So this very left one right here is going to be track 1, then track 2, 3, 4, etc. And we need to add a few effects on these audio tracks for my voice. So the first thing we're going to do is grab what is called a hard limiter. So this is going to make sure that nothing goes over -1 decibels and nothing is peaking. So all you got to do is add the limiter effect, click on it, and then add -1 to your limiting value. So this way, nothing is going to peak over that -1 value. The next thing that we're going to add right here, you can click this drop-down menu, is going to be what's called dynamics. And we're going to double click that and then add a compressor. So click on this compressor icon. Typically, I like to add like 1.5 ratio to my compressor. And I know this doesn't mean a whole lot to you, but you can just try this out and kind of play with things over time. But I like to add a compressor as well. I'll hit play so we can kind of hear my voice and look at what's going on. Back in 2019, so it's getting a little bit old at this point. So we can see that the compressor is trying to compress things, and we want to get the threshold just to where it's just barely kissing it so that it can compress when I get really loud, but not affecting too much of my audio experience. That's a great zoom range for things like vlogging or taking portraits or even capturing subjects that are really far away from your camera. All right, that sounds a lot better. The next thing that we're gonna add is an EQ. So we can go in right here and select our filter and EQ setting. Right here, we're gonna add the parametric equalizer effect, and then we'll double click on that. And if this looks scary, I understand. I'll actually hit play real quick so you can see what it looks like visually, even capturing subjects that are. And so all of these waveforms correspond to the actual frequencies of my voice. And it's a visual representation of the low end frequencies, which are like the lower bassy parts of my voice, which is few and far between. And then the higher frequencies over here on the right side are the brighter parts of my voice. So we can adjust some of these parameters to make our voice just sound a little bit better. So typically what I like to do is add what's called a high pass filter, which just cuts out a lot of the low end frequencies. And typically you can bring this anywhere between like 60 Hertz or 100 Hertz at most. I mean, right around here. You don't want to cut out too much of the low end frequencies because that's just going to eliminate all of the deep parts of your voice. But typically anything in this range, right around, 70 Hertz or 75 Hertz is not going to be heard by most people's voices. We'll also do the same thing on the really high end side, right around like 1700 Hertz. None of that's going to be really important sound for you to hear. So it still sounds a little bit muffled, like the low end frequencies are a little bit too present. So what I'd like to do is grab this little high end indicator right here, drag it to around maybe like 8,000 Hertz or so. And then we're going to raise up the high end frequencies just to add a little bit of brightness to our voice. Built-in pop-up viewfinder that you can use to take photos or record video. And this is great when you're outside and you don't want to go too far with this or it'll sound a little bit unnatural. And depending on what microphone you used or what room you're in, you might have to do different things to your voice in different situations. I'm also going to grab this number 2 band right here and lower some of this low end frequency because it's just sounding a little bit too muddied for me. So you can increase your influence of the amount of frequencies that it's eliminating or decrease. So if you decrease it, it gets really narrow and you'd be cutting out just a really small portion of these frequencies, or you can widen your influence to influence more frequencies in that range. So you don't want to go too wide here, but I'm going to go like maybe right there, bring it back up so it's not getting rid of too much. And then I do want to add a little bit of the low end frequencies back, so I'm not cutting out too much of my low end voice. So I'm going to increase those low ends here and then cut out some of this muddied sound right around this range. Maybe I'll even kind of widen the influence a little bit more. And as you can see, it's kind of a dance to get your EQ sounding better, and you're going to do something a little bit different each time. It also has a built-in pop-up viewfinder that you can. All right, that's sounding a lot brighter, which I like. The last effect that we'll add is add a denoise filter. So click denoise and then double click. And typically this starts off like at 40% denoise. You do not want to go that high. Typically, I usually put it around right around like 13 or 14% at most. Is what I'll keep it at, and we can listen to that back. In pop-up viewfinder that you can use to, and if you hit output noise only, it will show you what this audio effect is doing. So if I click that, we can hear take photos or record. It's eliminating that sound print from your audio file. And remember, because we're using that audio track mixer, it's adding that effect to everything you see in track 1. So if you start bringing audio effects or music into track 1, it's going to add all of these same effects to track 1. So you don't necessarily want to do that. You basically want to have one person's voice with one microphone on one audio track so that you're able to do this sort of workflow. Now I do want to add a couple basic titles throughout my video just to add a little bit of visual interest. And the first one I'm going to put right here, I'm just going to put the name of the camera as I say the name of the camera. The camera right here is the Sony RX100 Mark VII. So I want to see that on screen. So a really quick way to add text is to hit T on your keyboard and then anywhere in this window, just start typing. So click right here and I'm going to type the name of this camera, Sony RX100 Mark 7. So that's the name of the camera. Then I'm going to highlight all of that so we can make some adjustments. If you come over here to your effects controls, you can see this is my text right here, and I need to expand this window so we can start making some adjustments. So the first thing is the font. We're going to choose this Helvetica font right here, 96 black. This is typically what we use for our Think Media videos. And because this is all capitalized, I guess I'm also going to make Sony capitalized just so there's consistency there. I'm also going to raise the font size so it's a little bit larger and takes up more of the frame. I'm also going to hit V on my keyboard so I can start moving this around a little bit. And if I hold Command as well while I do this, it will snap to the very center of the frame, which is where I want it to be. And just to get a little bit of better background separation, I'll scroll down to this text and I will add a drop shadow. You can even add like a background if you wanted to. You could like make it nice and large. So you could add like a colorful background if you wanted to, like a red background really quickly. I don't want to do that here. I'm going to remove the background and I'm just going to keep that drop shadow effect on there. And that's looking pretty good right there in terms of a simple title. But I would like to add some movement to this title to make it a little more interesting. And that's where this effects controls panel comes in even more. And you can do lots of things with your effects controls panel. You can scale up your video clips to make them larger or smaller. You can also transform the positioning where you move things left and right or up and down. So you can use this tool for basically any type of clip or text effect. And in this instance, we could use it to add like a simple scale. So we could click the stopwatch right here, and that's going to add a keyframe to the very first frame of that video. And then we can add an additional keyframe right here further in the video, and then just scale our size up. So maybe we wanted to increase it by 50%. So it goes from 100% to 50% really quickly. And that's kind of a weird effect. Let's watch it. It just like is way too slow. So what you can do is retime these keyframes a little bit. So maybe it zooms a little quicker. And then another thing you can do is highlight both of these keyframes, right click, and then add like an ease in. So instead of the keyframe moving linearly, where it's just gonna like stay a consistent time of like scaling from 100 to 150%, you can make it ramp a little bit more where it's gonna kind of ease in a little bit slower as it gets to the end of that scaling. You can see that the logo just changed a little bit, and let's watch this scaling back. And it just kind of eases in right there. Now, if you did want to look at some presets that Premiere has, you could go up here to Workspaces and hit Captions and Graphics. And this is going to open up some different options for you. But you can scroll through a bunch of different templates that Adobe has for different titles. And you can just like drag those directly onto your video clip and then start making adjustments from there. So we could like dive into this presets. You can look at the shape. Do you want the shape? Do you not want the shape? Do you want the text? And how big do you want the text to be, the overall text? So yeah, lots of adjustments you can make here to these preset animations that Premiere has. Now, what if I want to add some movement to our A-roll footage where maybe the image scales up or down to add a little bit more interest? Well, it's really easy to do in Premiere. All you need to do is click on the video clip that you want to make that adjustment for. And I want to make that on the very first frame of video for this video. I kind of want to just push in and draw the viewer into the video. So what I'll do is go up to my effects controls panel and make sure I've selected that individual clip. And we're going to turn on the stopwatch for our position and our scale. And that adds a keyframe to the first frame of that video clip. And then we'll just go a little bit into the video clip and then add another couple keyframes. Then what I'll do is increase my scale a little bit. I don't want to go too far here, maybe just like 7%, so 107%. And because I adjusted that scaling, I also kind of want to reposition the video. You don't want to go too high, right? Because it's going to start falling off the frame, but I'll just go a little bit of adjustment. And we can see that that clip is zooming in, but it stops right here in the middle of the clip. So I need to click and hold and drag these clips to the very end of that clip so that scaling happens over the duration of that intro. Let's watch that intro clip now. This is my favorite point and shoot camera, and I love that little scaling effect. It's a really great way to just draw the viewer into your first frame and add some additional interest to your video. So check out for that. You probably have seen it in my Think Media videos here on the channel before. Now let's touch base really quickly on some color correcting. So you're going to want to change your workspace when it comes time to color correct. And you can click this workspaces button up here and then dive into your color workspace. So this is going to pull up your Lumetri color panel color correcting tab. And this is how you're going to color correct your footage in Adobe Premiere. So I'll show you how I would color correct this clip right here. Overall, the exposure looks pretty good, but if I wanted to click onto the clip, you can see that I have the ability to edit it right here. I could increase the exposure or decrease the exposure. Overall, I think my exposure is pretty correct, but we'll increase it just a little bit, maybe add a little bit of contrast, lower those highlights because you can see those whites up there are a little bit too bright. I can also lower those whites to just make them pop a little bit less. They're a little bit too bright in the background. increase my shadows. Let's just see what that's looking like. If I hit a before and after right here by toggling this on and off, you can just see it added a subtle effect to make it a little more punchy. You could also add, like in this creative tab, you could add some creative color grades. So maybe you have some LUTs that you've uploaded, and this is where you would upload those LUTs. One of my favorite ones is right here, is a custom LUT that I've made. And so it kind of shifts the colors a little bit to be a little bit teal and orange. So I could add that at maybe 30% power. You don't want to go too far with it because it looks ridiculous. But yeah, I added maybe about 35% power. That just shifts the colors a tiny bit. So I actually just went in and adjusted my A-roll color correction a little bit. But as you can see, it doesn't look like anything has happened to this clip. I click on the clip and there's no adjustments made. Well, that's because I actually made the adjustment to the source footage, which is a really great hack so that you don't have to add the color correction to every single individual clip. I mean, look at how many A-roll clips I have. I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have like 20 plus A-roll clips that I don't want to go in and add the same color correction effect to every single clip. Ideally, you can just edit the source footage one time and it's going to apply that same color correction to every single clip. So as you can see in my color correction tab, instead of editing this clip right here, I went and clicked the source footage, and that's where all of these adjustments were made. And you can actually see that you're able to go to your effects controls panel, and same thing. Typically, if you click a certain clip, it will be selected right here, but you could edit the source footage instead by clicking the source icon, and then it's going to show you any effects that have been added to the source clip. So if we go back to our A-roll clip right here, we can see that I have done some adjustments to the individual clip itself with some little scaling at the very beginning, but then I'll go over to the left and hit source footage, and we see that there's been a lumetri color effect added to the source footage. If I toggle this on and off, you can see the little color correction we did to correct for exposure and color. So that's a big time-saving tip if you want to color grade your footage, but don't want to individually color correct every item. Or maybe it's even just one clip of B-roll, but it appears at multiple different points in the video. Instead of needing to color correct that clip at one section and then another section, you can just color correct them all one time by color correcting the source footage instead of the individual clips. Now, another easy color correction tip is this white balance tool. So there's a little eyedropper right here that I can click and then drag onto a certain portion of video. Like my shoe, I know is pure white because I know these shoes, I have these shoes and they're white shoes. I can click that to white balance off of my shoe. And you can see that our temperature increased 10 points and our tint decreased by 1. So it just made a little adjustment. I'll show you, I'll turn it off and on, and you can see that it's a little bit warmer and it's just adjusting for our white balance really quickly. So that's a really great way to get correct white balance really quickly. Just select a white object in your scene, click the auto white balance tool, and you should get pretty close most of the time. Okay, at this point, we've edited our entire video. And if you ever want to see a specific window highlighted full screen, like if I want to show you our entire timeline right now, I can click on a specific window like our timeline and then hit the tilde key, and then it's going to open up that whole window and make it full screen for you. So we can kind of zoom in and see our entire editing timeline right here. We have all of our A-roll footage right here that we spent some time editing. All of our B-roll is on top of our A-roll footage. And then we have some graphics. We have sound effects on this layer right here. And then we have some music right here as well. Now, when it comes time to export your video, you want to go to the very last frame of your video, and then you're going to hit Out on your keyboard. So make sure you're at the very last frame, hit O, and also make sure it doesn't select this additional frame right here. You actually kind of want to go one frame back and then hit O so it's not getting that black frame of video at the very end. So the quickest way to export is probably just to go up to this export tab that's new to these newer versions of Premiere and click export, and that's going to open up this export dialog box. Or if you're in the editing timeline and you don't want to grab your mouse cursor anywhere, you can just quickly hit Command M on your keyboard and that'll open up this export box as well. Now, as you can see at a glance, this is the timeline that it's working with, and you can see there's an out point selected. So it's only going to export this portion of the video that we intentionally selected to export. Here's where you can choose a file name for your export as well as a location where you want the export to go. So typically I would actually go to my tutorials, the review that I'm working on, and inside of project files, I would create a new folder called exports. And then I would let my export live here because a lot of times, you know, as editing, like you have 5 different versions. You have version 1, 2, 3, 4, you know. So what I would do is create an exports folder with your different versions in case you need to export the video multiple times. If you made any mistakes, save it to that location. And here's where you would select your format or maybe a preset. There's a high quality 4K preset. I've actually created a YouTube 4K preset that I use, but typically you'll just want to make sure you're exporting in the H.264 codec. So it's a little bit more of a compressed codec, but it's very user-friendly to transfer between files as well as upload to a place like YouTube. At this point, your video is ready to be exported and you can just hit export and your video will start exporting. And this is about a 90-second video, and on my M3 MacBook Pro, it's taking about, 45 seconds or so to render this entire export, which is pretty fast. So once your export is finished, it should appear in that exports folder you just created, and you can open that up in QuickTime. And I would encourage you to watch back the video every single time to make sure there was no weird things that happen in the export. Sometimes that can happen with Premiere or other editing programs as well. So just watch it back and make sure everything's looking good. So that's my entire editing process for editing a video from beginning to end in Premiere Pro. If you would like all of the footage and even the finalized version of this video that we created today so you can check it out, go ahead and check the link down in the description below so you can get access to all of the project files for this video. And if you're still dialing in your editing setup and you want to check out my favorite editing setup for under $1,000 that's based around the Mac Mini, you can click or tap the screen right here to check out that video, and we'll see you in the next one.